When it comes to video games turned movies, Silent Hill is often cited as one of those that is closest to its source material.
No. It's not true.
Now, anybody who's actually played these Silent Hill games is probably yelling at their computer screen right now, shouting a collective, Silent Hill, released in 2006 and based on the 1999 survival horror video game for the Sony PlayStation, was a story about a single father named Harry Mason who had lost his daughter Cheryl in a seemingly empty and fog-filled town named Silent Hill. Among further exploration, Harry begins to see the environments around him progressively degrade and shift into a hellish otherworld filled with monsters and a 14-year-old schoolgirl leading Harry throughout the town and uncovering a plot by a cult who wanted to use her in their attempts to birth their god. Cheery stuff, isn't it? But what the game is most remembered for is its creatures, design, and psychological metaphors for the creatures, locations, and even the events all being tied together to the host's subconscious. Why did I tell you all this rather than just getting to the movie first? Well, because these are concepts that are very important to understanding the nature of Silent Hill, which is a concept that is very easy to screw up if you can't even understand the basic concepts of how the town of Silent Hill works. But first getting into the positives, and that would be the look and presentation of the movie, which looks fucking gorgeous, man. It very much emulates the design of both the town and the otherworld from the games. Another great plus to this movie is that you'll see many dynamic shots and sequences which all replicate something that you would generally see in the games, with a great sequence paying homage to one of the many puzzles in the games with the key in the janitor's mouth. Further adding to the presentation will be the musical pieces by Akira Yamaoka, taken from most of the games in the series, though it mostly borrows from Silent Hill 2. But the fact that it's actually there is still a massive bonus when you consider the fact that the soundtrack could have easily been replaced with generic scare chords and a metalcore sounding Roadrunner Records licensed soundtrack. So overall, the movie's technical aspects nail the look of Silent Hill, but we're just beating around the bush here, so let's look at how closely that the movie's story adapts the game's story. Oh man, where do I begin? Well, to start off, the movie's plot at least gets the premise of what the first Silent Hill game is about, which is of course a parent searching for their missing child. But then again, that's just like saying that the gist of Resident Evil is zombies and Jill sandwiches, so yeah. Right off the bat, we're introduced to Rose Da Silva, played by Australian actress Radha Mitchell, who pretty much serves Harry's role in the film as the protagonist, and this already clues us in about the questionable decisions made by director Christoph Gans during the production of the movie. Now, the decision to change Harry into Rose was a decision that was made by Gans because he thought that a woman would be a more fitting choice as a mother searching for their daughter, because, you know, all fathers don't give a shit about their children. And trust me, this isn't even the worst change that Gans made to the Silent Hill movie. Anyway, getting back to the movie's plot, because their daughter Sharon won't stop screaming Silent Hill! Rose decides that the best cure for Sharon's night terrors isn't to get any medical help or seek out a child psychologist because, you know, that's for sane people. Instead, she decides to go to Silent Hill hoping that the problem will sort itself out there. Mother of the Year, everybody! It's at this point that we're introduced to Sybil Bennett, the police officer from Brems, who in the games acts as a realist in the situation that Harry is facing. Not necessarily in the sense that Sybil exists in the real world as we know it, but more so as an indicator of how far-fetched the situation is, hinting towards the bad ending of the first game. In the movie, however, Sybil is... oh man.
Get out of the car. Move it.
Jesus, what are you doing? What?
You have the right to remain silent.
Why?
Anything you say
What
can
the
and will
hell
be used
for?
against you in a court of law.
I don't think you understand. There's something weird going on here. My daughter.
Sharon, she's in danger.
If you really cared about that little girl, you wouldn't have sped off.
Now that those scenes are fresh in your mind, let me show you how Sybil acts in the games.
How do you feel?
Oh, like I've been run over by a truck. But I'm alright, I guess.
Glad to hear it.
In that case, I need to find her now. Cheryl's my little girl.
Have you got a gun? Take this. And hope you don't have to use it.
As much as I really don't want to let my inner game fanboy spoil this review, this really does aggravate me. As you've just seen, Sybil in the games acts nothing like the aggressive bitch you see in the movie. Later on, it does explain that Sybil's aggression towards Rose is due to a case where she saved a little boy who was kidnapped and trapped down a mine shaft, and whilst I can understand her paranoia to some extent, all this serves to do is just give Sybil an arbitrary reason to be in the movie, which was already unnecessary considering the fact that in the games, Sybil hints towards the reason that she was even going to Silent Hill in the first place was to investigate the White Claudia drug trade. Getting back on track, however, the story does follow the first game for the most part, and I did really enjoy how the alleyway scene was shot closely resembling to how it was in the game. Unfortunately though, the plot begins to take a turn for the worse when we reach the Otherworld school and then we get the appearance of this guy. Now, the appearance of this guy, if the lying figures seen earlier didn't already clue you in, is a very big mistake for this movie. As I've mentioned earlier, the monsters of Silent Hill are all connected through the host's subconscious, which in this case is a lesser. The problem, however, is that Pyramid Head was never seen nor mentioned until Silent Hill 2, the sequel to the first game. Therefore, all his appearances here come off as nothing more than... But my main problem isn't really that they've handpicked monsters. I mean, if anything, the fan service is appreciated. But the big issue I have here is that they didn't go out of their way to establish new symbolic meanings for the pre-existing monsters. I mean, with Pyramid Head, you could have easily had a small scene with visual indicators showing that maybe Pyramid Head represents a protector, being the father that Alessa never had. Speaking of which, the movie soon deviates from the game's plot almost completely when we're introduced to Dahlia Gillespie, a homeless woman that's been driven mad by the death of her daughter Alessa, and for those of you thinking that she's the mastermind like in the games, haha, you are sorely mistaken. Enter Krista Bella, a character who never appeared in the games and was only added as this movie's villain because she makes Dahlia Gillespie from the first game look less one note by comparison with her constant quote of
Burn her! Burn her as a witch!
Ah yes, Krista Bella, teaching us life lessons. Remember kids, when life gives you shit,
burn her as a witch!
Anyway, we soon learn through flashback sequences that Alessa was a virgin birth and that she has to die for some reason, and basically sets off the coal fire that made Silent Hill so uninhabitable. It's also in this scene that we see Lisa Garland, who's also here for some reason. No Dr. Kaufman though, which is weird since he had a very large behind the scenes role in the first game, but moving on. But to cut a long story short, eventually shit gets real as Sybil is captured and burned alive, Rose finds Sharon, the cold is ripped apart by a barbed wire creature, and finally they drive off home to another world version of their home, trapped forever in the fog where reality so Alessa could have her vengeance. What a touching story, I guess. You all might be wondering why I've neglected to mention Sean Bean's character of Chris Da Silva, and that's mostly because his character was nothing more than an afterthought once the script was complete. He has no influence upon the events of the movie and serves as nothing more than exposition so everybody knows what the hell's going on. Overall, what really pisses me off about the Silent Hill movie is that in terms of its aesthetics, it looks, feels, and sounds like a Silent Hill movie should, and that's something that I feel works in the movie's favour. However, in terms of adapting the game's story, Silent Hill only gets the gist of what the first game's plot was about. But then again, that's just like saying getting the plot to a Resident Evil movie is zombies, T-virus.
Good enough.
And I mean, hell, at least the first Resident Evil movie was kind enough to have a plot that was completely severed from the main games, unlike Christoph Gann's fanfiction we got for this movie. However, to be totally fair to this movie, while it does fall flat as an adaptation, on its own merits, it does at least make for a decent horror flick. Not anything groundbreaking, but it's something that I'd easily take over most modern horror movies made today. Well, with that said, I'm Skully, keep it new metal, and as Krista Bella likes to tell us,
Burn her as a witch!